since we have quite a few people on here that are joining us from other parts of the country, but typically the way that we structure Daughterhood San Diego in terms of our meetings, let me just explain how we structure it. So when we meet, we usually have we usually alternate. So we'll have a guest speaker 1 month, and then that guest speaker will typically be like an expert in the area, in some area related to caregiving or as part of the caregiving experience. And then the following month, the next time we meet, we'll have something called a chat fest. And a chat fest is where we talk, we connect, we give support to our fellow Daughterhood members, wherever they are in that caregiving journey. So tonight but right before our second speaker, Julie, who you just heard from, we're gonna have a very brief chat fest, and we're gonna hear from Pam Villalobos, she's a kindred soul within Daughterhood. She's been with us since the very beginning, 5 years ago when we first started in 2015. She started coming to each circle gathering we had, even though she lived the furthest away. So she made it a point, to make it part of her self-care, to nurture herself, to be with others who are going through a similar journey. So her caregiving experience was a long one, but tonight she's just going to briefly tell us about her experience so that she can serve others, and support other caregivers that are going through this journey right now. So, with pleasure, I introduce you to Pam Villalobos, who, again, Karen and I just love Pam, again, just as such a kindred soul. So Pam, I'm gonna let you take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so great to be here celebrating 5 years. Woohoo! I just have to say, as I've said before, that Karen and Christine, just every single time we've gotten together, just create this sacred space for us, and how much of a difference that's made in my life, and I know everyone else's. There's this feeling, especially now, of being so isolated and just, feeling down in yourself, second guessing. But coming to Daughterhood is so affirming. I never felt alone in my caregiving journey. Everyone's on my shoulders, whispering positive affirmations to me throughout the whole entire time. And Christine and Karen have been there for me personally, just throughout every bit of joy, as well as every bit of trauma and pain and suffering. And I just can't say how much I appreciate both of you, and to Anne for founding Daughterhood and being such a great resource, and being a part of the San Diego, experience. She's always been there for us too. So I just wanted to say that first and foremost. I want to see if I could just share a picture of my parents. Can you see it?
Oh, yes.
Art and Gloria Stoner, and they're holding hands apropos because they loved each other beyond any love I've ever seen. And that it was such a joy to care for them in that way, to be able to witness their love, and every single day telling each other, I love you, holding hands, kissing. They're just sweethearts. So such a pleasure to be their daughter and to be able to witness that kind of love. My journey started about 9 years ago. My parents were living on their own in the Orange County area, about 3 hours away from me. And my dad, after retirement, started having anxiety, became pretty severe, also showing some signs of dementia. My mom had already been retelling stories. I don't know if anyone has a parent that does that, and really not aware of it, but functioning otherwise. So things started to go downhill pretty quickly with my dad. So we actually hired an agency similar to Christine's to go in and provide some extra support, get my dad outside, get him engaged, make sure things were okay in the refrigerator, and start working with his medications and that kind of thing. And it became clear that that wasn't going to work. The caregivers would call me, sorry, Pam, I'm at the door. Your mom locked it. She won't let me in. She's screaming at me to go away. She doesn't need us. And so after, I can't get into all the details because of our time limit, but suffice to say, it was not doable, and we needed to move them closer to me because I was raising my own family and driving 3 hours once or twice a week to deal with the latest crisis and to try to help my dad and try to calm my mom down. So I want to start the story though by saying on one of those visits, I took my dad to a park and we were sitting at a lake, and I was just, my mind was going a million different directions, things that I didn't get done, things I was worried about, how I was going to handle this. And my dad said, he has this huge smile on his face, and he said, "Look at that light on the water. Look at that duck. Oh my God." And he was just enthralled with the present moment and what he was seeing. And at that moment, I said, this is it. I'm going to meet my dad where he's at in the present moment, and meet my mom with her struggles and her, she's fiercely independent. Things are being taken away from her. She wants to be there for my dad and she really can't. And so it really was a light bulb that went off in my brain that this is it. So I started getting back into meditation and mindfulness and yoga. And then we decided to move my parents closer to me. And we decided they couldn't live with me. Where I live is very cold and very hot, and there was no space, and I've got these younger kids. So we decided maybe they'd feel more independent in their own apartment. And we found a community where it would be easy for me to get to as regularly as possible, and set them up in the apartment. My dad pretty much surrendered to everything and was pretty, again, living in the moment. He had a lot of agitation and anxiety, but he was going with it. My mom wasn't having it. My sister ended up getting involved in, we actually agreed to allow my parents to live with her. That didn't work out after a few months, back to the community, progressing through assisted living, and finally to memory care when my dad was wandering and showing up in everyone's apartments at 4 o'clock in the morning. So it was, the times that I came and talked at Daughterhood, shared my experience, listened to those that were ahead in the journey, became a frequent flyer at San Diego Alzheimer's for every workshop and class I could get to, and call and ask for help. I did all of those things, and I'm sure glad I did, because I always knew what to expect. I listened really closely to Karen and others that were ahead of the game and knew what to expect. And luckily I had a brother who helped with all the things that Amy talked about. And we got all the legal and documents in place and power of attorney. So I was a trustee and power of attorney. So everything was pretty smooth sailing. I tried to be prepared, knowing the hospital visits weren't just once in a lifetime, but would become very regular with 2 parents. My mom developed also pretty severe dementia, I think Alzheimer's also. And so it was just a day-to-day of trying to find those joyful moments, being in the present moment. Some of the things that I did with them was non-negotiable was that they stayed together. Other communities talked about, well, your dad is so much further along, he's going to need more care, we're going to divide them into 2 apartments. And so that's my happiest memory, is that I actually absolutely know they need to be together. And I'm so glad for that. Even when my dad was dying and had to be in a hospital bed, we were able to push my mom right next to him, lower the guardrails, let them hold hands and love each other. So sorry, I'll try not to cry through all of this. Anyhow, so my dad had a stroke, and he was already on hospice because he was starting to really, lose. He wasn't eating as much and not as physically active. Finally did have to use a wheelchair after he had a stroke. And a couple months later, he was dying. And because of my experience in Daughterhood, I have this whole new perception and philosophy of death. And instead of being afraid, I was brave, and my siblings came on board, and we just made it a beautiful experience with my dad. And we all bathed him together, and my sister and I went to the crematorium and had our own little ceremony with my dad there at the crematorium, sprinkled rose petals and read poetry. And so then it was my mom and me, and just, again, like I was all in on caregiving, and I was all in on trying to ease her suffering and her misunderstanding and confusion about my dad. And so it wasn't really until probably the last 6 months that she really just surrendered. She was the kind of person that no one could get to take a shower. It took forever to get her to stop, to give up the idea of driving, that she wasn't going to pay the bills, that there were just things that she wasn't able to do. And I learned a lot of tricks along the way from San Diego Alzheimer's and Daughterhood, and just mostly just tried to respect their dignity and approach everything with love. And again, try to be in the present moment with them. So my mom was doing pretty well. I was visiting her a lot. She really depended on me. I was the one relative daughter that was there and that she loved and she knew. I was so fortunate that neither one of them ever forgot me. And then the pandemic hit. And just like that, this facility was closed to visitors. So I couldn't see her in person. And that was like the hardest part of the entire journey because I couldn't comfort her. I couldn't explain. So we did a lot of FaceTime, a lot of phone calls. The caregivers were amazing, stepping it up and helping us stay in contact. We found out that people on the floor above her, there were diagnoses of COVID for residents and caregivers. And eventually my mom was diagnosed. So we did a window visit, my daughter and I, and my mom was still coherent, waving, smiling, not able to talk and not eating anymore. And we did get a hospice on board right away because before then she was really pretty healthy. And just within a couple of days, she didn't wake up. She was alive, but non-responsive. So luckily I leaned on Karen and Christine a lot to make sure that if I wasn't allowed to go in, that we figured out how to talk to the community and make it happen. But luckily there weren't any snags there and I was able to get in. My brothers came to the window the day before she died and we, loved on my mom and sang to her and prayed with her. And the next day she was gone. So tough. I didn't think twice about going in to be with her. I did end up having COVID myself, but pretty much asymptomatic, luckily. My friend calls it tangled grief. It's just so much in the pandemic, all of the losses that have occurred, and what's happening in our world with police brutality and racism. It just all tangled together. So that's kind of the journey in a nutshell. But I do want to say that taking care of my parents, as hard as it was a privilege and an honor, and really made me a better person. I'm still trying to be mindful and positive and think about, instead of focusing on what if this happens, what is happening right now. And it sure helps to be prepared. And I'm happy that we did that. And I'm happy I always did think ahead, but I also am happy that I've learned those skills to really refocus, be aware when I'm going to a different place and settle down into what is and be here for the present moment. My friend shared a mantra with me that I think I shared it right at the beginning 5 years ago in Daughterhood that I still read every day. So I'll end with that. Just show up, be brave, rest, try again. So I know we took a lot of time, but if there's any other daughters that would like to share something important from their journey, this would be great to hear. And thank you all for listening.
Can you unshare the screen, Pam?
Let's see.
Did
that work?
Okay, I'm speechless. That doesn't really happen very much in my life. I mean, we went through all of this with you, but to hear you share this, it's huge. It's really you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for being who you are.
Thank you.
And I don't know if any of the other folks on the call have any questions for Pam. I know they're sending you well wishes. Wonderful story. Thanks so much. Just show up. Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing, Pam. I'm so sorry. Everything that Pam said, that is the journey of the daughter. Some of them are different than Pam's, but that is the start to the finish. And at the finish, she is a Godspeed caregiver, as am I. And the Godspeed caregiver provides so much wisdom and awesome stories to show us we can do this. We can show up and we can do this. Pam, thank you so much. So grateful.